Israel. We are here again, another night, another lesson. My name's Asna Pash,
Aman Allah.
and tonight's lesson is going to be in regards to Deuteronomy 28, verse 37. Under the curses, which is, the name of the title for the lesson is Black and Brown, a Lost Identity. A Lost Identity. So, we going to go straight into it. Give me Deuteronomy 28.
Verse 37. And thou shalt become a astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee.
So the Most High's right here. If anybody recalls, there's a contract that the Most High made with us through Moses thousands of years ago. And he told us from the jump, he said, if you follow these laws, you will be blessed. If you do the opposite, curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So that's one thing that we really, really got to understand in this present time, because apparently we haven't gotten the full understanding, or some of us don't even know that this is a contract that we must abide by. And everything that's happening in this world, in this present day, is due to the fact that we continue to disobey the Most High, and we continue to, break the contract that we, through blood, by blood, made with the Most High. Let's get that as a matter of fact to prove that right quick. I believe it's Exodus. What is it, 24?
I believe it might be in Deuteronomy. All the words of this law we shall do.
Nah, but get this right here. Exodus 24 and start at verse 3.
Exodus 24 and verse 3. And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord hath said will we do.
Some of them.
All the words which the Lord hath said will we do.
So knowing that you, Israel, it's necessary to understand and go back into the law, the first 5 books, the whole Bible, and understand your history, understand what it is that the Most High told us to commit by, told us that we needed to do according to his words. Because he said right here, all the words which the Lord hath said, we will do. That's a contract. That's a covenant that our people were making with the Most High. Continue on.
And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and builded an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord.
Go ahead.
And Moses took half of the blood.
Check this out. Go ahead.
He took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said will we do, and be obedient.
You see that? And will be obedient. He got this blood, right? It was a sacrificial blood that was sprinkled on the altar. And with this blood, it was made a blood covenant was made, which the next verse is going to go into, with the Most High, between the Most High and us, his people. Go ahead, read verse 8.
And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words.
Exactly. So that's what happened. That's why you got to understand that imagine it's a blood covenant. Just imagine a contract out here in the world. If you breach that contract, what happens? A lot of things happen, right? Cars get repossessed, homes get repossessed, credit goes bad. A lot of negative stuff happens. Right here, the Most High is making a blood covenant with us. That blood that also represents Yahweh Shai in the New Testament, that was made with his people, Israel and none else. So the Most High said right here, let's go back to Deuteronomy 28 and get 15 before we go back to 37.
Deuteronomy 28 and 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
Con. So let's go to the PowerPoint out. Let's break this down right quick. So the brother read 37 already. We're going to go back to it. Aharam. Read 37 again.
Verse 37 in Deuteronomy 28. And thou shalt become an astonishment and a proverb and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee.
So imagine, before we go there, read 64, so we could get that full understanding. We've been in many captivities throughout the days, throughout the time, right? And this is another curse, because the Most High says, wherever he will lead us. Get 64 right quick.
Verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one in the earth and even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known.
Imagine that. So Most High said he was going to scatter us throughout the four corners of the earth, right? So it says right here, curses, black and brown, a lost identity. Then we go back to this verse that the brother read. So it says, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. So let's check these definitions out right quick. Can you get those out?
Yes, sir. An astonishment, something extremely surprising or impressive. A proverb. Proverb is a simple, concrete, traditional saying that expresses a perceived truth based on common sense or experience. Proverbs are often metaphorical and use formulaic language. Collectively, they form a genre of folklore. And a byword, a person or thing cited as notorious and outstanding, example or embodiment of something. His name became a byword for luxury.
Exactly. So when you get that understanding, the brother's going to go through a list. Briefly, I got a couple other ones that, this list is not going to be too long. It could be, but we're not going to make it long. Just because, it's obvious with everything that's happened throughout our generations, and just in our generation, this present one right now, which is basically what? Just go back about 20 years. Go back 10 years. Go back 5 years. Go back a couple of weeks. Nothing has ever changed. You go back even to the beginning of days, you see how these nations would always deal with us and how they would always deal with us. There was always, since the Most High, it's funny though, because when you read, Isaiah 17?
Yeah, I actually got that bookmark for you.
Con.
17 and 4.
Yeah, get that?
Or no, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah 17.
Jeremiah 17 and 4. It says this, and thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not.
So we're going to bring that up in a bit again. But imagine this, the Most High is saying, and thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever. So, to really understand everything that we're going through, we need to understand the scriptures. We got to go back and study our heritage. But it's unfortunate when, through our disobedience, we made it pretty much impossible to an extent.
Right.
Which was also part of the prophecy. The Most High said there will be, pretty much a scarcity in the land of this truth. And then it would come back again. Came back again. We hear all praises to the Most High. We understand who we are. But still, a lot of people out there look at it like, you know what, that's not the solution. The solution is protesting. The solution is going in and creating certain parties, right? Like Black Power movements, Brown Berets, AIM, and so forth. Mecha, and indigenous, all the different indigenous groups that we have. We have, certain groups within the city, even the Bloods, the Crips, that came about, to look out for the well-being of the people. But look at where we at nowadays. All these groups and all these movements, including this truth, Esau, the devil through Esau always finds a way on how to infiltrate. So we must know our history. We must understand that that's a possibility. But first of all, we must understand who we are to be able to go back and really search what it is that the Most High wants from us. So we could basically set up plans on how to go and really rebel against the system. Because let me get Psalms 147 right quick. Psalms 147, 19 and 20. And then I do want Isaiah.
Psalms 147, verse 19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nation. As for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord.
Exactly. So there's no way. And that's another thing. It says his judgments. Read 20 again.
He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord.
Praise ye the Lord. That's showing you again a verification on who is who in this world. Because if you look at all the persecution that always goes down and has gone down since pretty much, if you want to look at America only, right? Since the beginning, since this country originated, right? It's always been between the indigenous people and the so-called blacks. I'm not even going to use terms like Latino and none of that yet, but I'm saying indigenous because it was the native people that were here, you know? And that's why we also even have so many issues, because we don't recognize that. We don't recognize the fact that there's so many terms that we go by, and it's real necessary when you understand the history, you'll be able to see the spirit in the people. The spirit in the people could really tell you whether they're Israel or not, no matter what language they speak, no matter what shade of tone they are. But when you understand these scriptures and then you look at their background, you look at the lifestyle that they, you know, are living or have lived or their ancestors come from, you're able to identify. You know, I know a brother would ask me even like, how do you recognize a Mexican from a Central American, from a South American, and so forth? When you live amongst the people and you really like, I guess, not so much study them, but you realize and are able to recognize the different traits of certain people, then that's how you're able to see like what the scripture talks about. What is it? Romans 8:16, right? The Spirit beareth witness. You'll understand that the Spirit of the Most High that's in Israel is going to bear witness no matter what land you might be in, whether you in Ghana, whether you in Jamaica, whether you in Barbados, and so forth. The Spirit, read that as a matter of fact.
Romans 8 and 16. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God.
Exactly. So it could be a little complicated at times, especially, you know, the way they have it designed. Certain people, a lot of us, a lot of our people, a lot of Israel, don't ever get the opportunity to travel outside of wherever you were born or whatever, you know, is near whatever country you were born at. So once you start experimenting and going around the world and recognizing off the top, you know, first off, understanding these laws and understanding the spirit of an Israelite, you'll be able to see the differences between a so-called native and a Spaniard. How can I put it? You know, because we do use the term Latino to an extent, but even that, going back to, you know, read Deuteronomy 28 and 37 again.
Deuteronomy 28 and verse 37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee.
Exactly. So read some of those, all right? And then I'll get a couple more.
All right. And just to kind of emphasize on this point, what he said about telling the difference between a Spaniard and an indigenous person, and how even today in Israel, we use the terms black, Latino, and Native American. And generally, we refer to Latino as still being of indigenous descent. But one of those terms today would be cholo. Now, it's been warped from its original meaning, but originally the word cholo was from la sistema de las castas. And that meant that one of your parents was mestizo, which was a descendant of Spaniard or an Indian, and then the other parent was Amerindian. So that's where cholo comes from with that. But today, cholo means like it's associated with like gangsterism, thugs, and other things that are people caught up in the ghettos happen to be caught up around because it's a low socioeconomic place of income where there's not much opportunity for jobs and things like that. So we embrace those titles and they get reinvented. And I guess I'm gonna keep going down the list with that. So cholo is one of those terms for the so-called Hispanic or Latino person, which is ultimately of indigenous descent. For black people, they call us, thugs. That's a bad example. I'm not gonna say that, but a lot of rappers from the 2000s, 80s, 90s, and even today, somewhere in their names or in their lyrics, they're representing being a thug. But a thug, that terminology literally comes from India, and that means that you're a swindler, or you're a person that you deceive to get your income and your goods, and that's not a good attribute and that's not a good trait. But that's what they pin on our people because our people do that in the socioeconomic situations that we're in. Cursed in the city. Maybe we could do Deuteronomy 28 and verse 16. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. So that's one aspect of a curse, that byword our people have on us.
Hey, look, not to cut you off on that one. Go to that. I have an article. I'm not able to play it on there, but read that right there.
Got you. It's
That's pretty much history breaking down all these. Well, at least that thug aspect of it. I know he got a lot more other terms that he's gonna bring up, but just check this out. As far as the history account that we have here, this is from a book. It's what page is that one? 264. 264 off of Media, Minorities, and Meaning by Deborah L. Merskin. Go ahead and read that.
Often driven to their deaths by overseers who whipped, tortured, punished, and exploited them, the coon was sometimes presented as oversexed, with a powerful, imposing physique, wily intelligence, and unbridled sense of courage. The root of today's black criminal stereotype can be traced to the coon. In addition, the coon caricature, for example, portrays black men as lazy, ignorant, and obsessively self-indulgent. These are also traits historically represented by the word nigger.
Imagine that, just to hold up on that right there. When you look at our history, for example, right? You read about Adam, you read about, Lot, you read about Abraham, you read about Jacob, you read about all these brothers, David, Yahweh, and so forth. Do you ever read in the history of the scriptures, in our history, that we were lazy, or that the Most High condoned that type of behavior? Imagine that. But then this right here, read the coon aspect again.
In addition, the coon caricature was
from the top, the second line. The coon was sometimes.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. The coon was sometimes presented as oversexed, with a powerful, imposing physique, wily intelligent, and unbridled sense of courage. The root of today's black criminal stereotype can be traced to the coon. And then, in addition, the coon caricature, for example, portrays black men as lazy, ignorant, and obsessively self-indulgent.
Exactly. So that's what you look at. We're going to play some videos in a minute, but I'm going to allow that Jay to continue and pull out some more names. And whatever he doesn't pull up, I'm going to pull up. But it sounds like pretty much we got the same thing. But like what he was saying about cholo, you ask a Mexican, for example, a cholo, his understanding of a cholo is only going to be, that's thug, like, a gangster in Spanish. Yeah. But like the brother said, cholo, this name, even when you go to South America right now, cholo's still used as an indigenous individual, a native indigenous person. Right. Not to say that that's better or worse, but imagine from being Israel, a chosen people, these are the terms that identify us nowadays. That's why Deuteronomy 28 and 37 said what it said. But go ahead, continue on.
And still on the same tip, for the Native Americans, white people call them and have called them in the past savages. And the good ones, much like the term coon, they call the noble savage. And that only is the reason because oh, they're savages because, you know, pretty much they're not giving us their land. They're fighting us and they're making war with us because, as in the perspective of the white person, we're taking their land. That's why they called them savages, because Israel, as far as the Native American 10 tribes, you know, we were going to war for quite some time, up until I'm sure past the Trail of Tears and everything like that. But that's why one of the terms you get from Native American Indians, they call them savages. And then the noble savage, again relating to Coon, those were the ones like your people like Pocahontas, Sacagawea, the ones that helped to teach the white man, I mean Esau, and how to navigate the land, higher spirituality and everything like that. Those were considered the noble savages, being like, oh, they're so in tune with the nature and everything like that, but at least they're helping us. So that goes even with that proverb and byword for anyone that shouldn't separate Latinos of indigenous descent and Indians. That goes with that. So that's just on that tip, on the gangster thug, you know, aggressive aspect. A couple other ones as far as concerning with blacks and Latinos, and this is more of an astonishment. So the reason being, Esau, I mean, he took us for the curses, but they still enjoy to this day us being in slavery and our labor. Mm-hmm. So they recognize and seen our athleticism, which is why they put us in sports, and they separate us like that, saying, okay, Latinos, Mexicans, you know, even amongst ourselves, they only play soccer. Blacks, the Negroes, they can only play basketball. That's, I mean, if you go to any park in South Central LA and, I mean, Southeast LA, you'll see way more so-called Chicanos of indigenous descent playing basketball. And then, I mean, not to put myself out there.
Mexico got a league, man.
Yeah.
A big league that a lot of brothers go from here to go play out there, you know?
There you go. There you go. So these proverbs and these bywords, they don't fully encompass the richness and the dynamic of our people, even when they may be so-called put in a positive light.
Come on.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, associating our people with athleticism and sport, that goes all the way back down to, you know, how good of a worker are you? How good are you going to be in my fields? How good are you going to be in the sugar plantations? How good are you going to be in the cotton field plantations? And then today, you know, the playoffs, NFL playoffs, the soccer leagues, World Cup, it all comes back down to that when it comes to the aspect of physical, I guess, I don't know the right word, but just a positive word that we have for our physical attributes.
Con, if I could cut in
sir.
right quick, you know, it's funny that with these protests right now, the NFL goes and apologizes to Kaepernick, right, for not listening to all the racism that, you know, has always existed in this country. But what are they doing for the brother? You know what I mean? It's like, it's funny how Esau always wants to play like they really care for Israel when they're the ones that create the problem, have always created the problem, are going to continue to create the issue, and then our people fall for the same okie doke. It's like, we got to remember these scriptures, and that's why it's so necessary to always go back while this brother is saying that, because he's saying, you know, an astonishment, extremely surprising or impressive. So you look at MJ, for example, you know, you look at Pelé, back in the day from Brazil, one of the best soccer players. You look at Tyson, he's talking about coming back. People still gonna pay top dollar for that type, you know, to see the brother get fight. And you go down the list, all these different athletes that come from Israel. I seen a post, I think it was yesterday, and it was how many shots you think you'd be able to score back in 1930 or something like that. And it's a bunch of Edomites playing. Man, that game, I don't know who'll be watching that game. Like, you know, I always hear the elders talk about it, like who will go and watch that game. Personally, I wouldn't. But then to see the lack of flavor that it had, I'm like, damn, that's sad right there. But showing you again in the scriptures, instead of being bywords and all that, which is how we are referred as nowadays, right? The Most High says in Matthew that we are the salt, we are the season to everything in this world. So going back to that, what the brother's bringing as far as the astonishment, this scripture came to mind. So if you could read this, Sirach 13 and start at 3. Oh, there you go.
Sirach 13, verse 3.
Yeah.
Sirach 13 and verse 3. The rich man hath done wrong, and yet he threateneth withal. The poor is wrong, and he must entreat also.
Go ahead.
If thou be for his profit,
If thou what?
if thou be for his profit, he will use thee.
And that's the thing. Our people keep falling for the same old nonsense instead of realizing we are a better people. And I'm not saying that because I'm thinking this. I'm saying this because this is what the scriptures tell us. And this is the same reason why Esau is so pissed off. He's the only one that's always trying to degrade every other people that's not so-called Caucasian, so-called white, Nordic, or whatever terminology they want to use. Because they always feel like they're a superior. They always thought that they were a superior race, yet their own dictionary says that they were inferior. They were a subhuman species. Their own Webster's dictionary says that. But they always want to act like they've been superior to everybody. And then it's obvious that they know who we are. It's obvious that they know who they are. And that's why I was telling the brother a little while ago, which we're going to read in a minute, Isaiah, what Isaiah 40 talks about. But go ahead, continue with that.
But if thou have nothing, he will forsake thee.
Exactly. And now that, we have, I guess, woken up to an extent. I mean, Israel knows who we are, but not everybody is getting lined up with these precepts and these scriptures. So like Judith always stated, not Judith, but the book of Judith states, and how the Bible always states, the Most High said, as long as we obey the Most High, then he fights for us. When we disobey the Most High, when we are living in sin, then guess what? We're going to be destroyed throughout, our battles. So it's necessary that we understand, even to take a stance in the, in the time we live in it, protests and all this. But at the end of the day, you look, a lot of this stuff is set up by design to still keep us in a divided sense, in a divided state. Because that's one thing that they always use. Malcolm X said it. He had a quote talking about the media, He had a couple of quotes about the media, but he was talking about how, the media will have you hating hating the oppressed people, your own people, and loving the oppressor. And that's what happens a lot of times when you look, because again, it's about 6 people, 6 elite, so-called elite, Edomites, white people, white individuals, white families that own all of the media. If you look at all this stuff that's happening right now with COVID and these protests, you hear the same names over and over. You hear the same names, going into everything from agriculture, media, school, education, technology. What else you have? Health. You got Trump. I mean, not Trump. Trump's a puppet. What's his name? Bill Gates, Soros. You have all these individuals. When you look at them, they all link up, and they're all the owners for all these big media platforms that everybody in the world uses. That's what the Most High is saying. Look, make sure you know and understand that you have enemies. He says, do not form no alliances with your enemies, especially when you don't consider them your enemies. Because a lot of our people is out here feeling good because all of a sudden, white people are beginning to care. Come on. If the scriptures already told you, know your enemy and never trust thine enemy, why are we going to fall for this nonsense over and over? But it happens, because finish that again. While we are for his profit, he will use us.
If thou have anything, he will live with thee. Yea, he will make thee bear, and will not be sorry for it.
Exactly. Go ahead.
If he have need of thee, he will deceive thee, and smile upon thee.
What exactly? So what need does does this USA, the country of the good old United States of America, what need do they have when it comes to Israel? How do they need us? And what forms are we, I guess, a good contribution to the nation?
Work.
Cheap labor. It's always been like that. From the beginning, we've been cheap labor. Then, besides being cheap labor, the money, the money that we get, we throw it right back into their economy. We're the greatest consumers, the biggest consumers in the whole wide world. So it's a win-win situation. It's fun. We're going to play some clips, too, where Trump says it. How am I going to hate Mexicans? I don't hate blacks. I make a lot of money from these people. So it's not saying that he loves the people. Of course he doesn't, but he's letting you know, like, look, I got like what the scripture said, I have a need of them, and they are for profit. So as long as they're for profit, then guess what? I'm going to use them.
And I'm going to smile.
And he's a blunt dog at the end of the day, which I give him props for that, because if more Edomites were like that, our people would probably, wake up a little faster. But on that tip, also go back to Genesis. You finished that, right?
There's a couple more sentences.
Finish that up.
If he have needed thee, he will deceive thee and smile upon thee and put thee in hope. Man, he will speak thee fair and say, what wantest thou?
Exactly. That's what they're doing right now. So please, my black brothers and sisters, Hispanos, blacks and browns, don't fall for that garbage. I see a lot of you guys out there protesting and starting groups, right, of rebellion and so forth. But you have the enemy within you. How are you going to win a battle in a war when the enemy is within? Ask the Black Panthers if that worked. Ask the Brown Berets if that worked. AIM if that worked. The Zapatistas if that worked. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And even our people, we got to screen and make sure that they about this cause. Because imagine you have the greatest example with Yahushua, Christ, and Judas. He was one of us, but he did the Most High Son dirty for what? A couple of shekels, a couple of coins for that bag. Nothing new. So we got to understand. You look at Alcimus and the Maccabees. You had individuals like that were wicked and rather go with the enemy than fight for their own people. Because that's the only battle we're ever going to win. If we fight for our people according to these oracles, where which is basically our government. If we don't abide by our government and these laws, we're not going to win anything. People are talking about, change is coming. Change is here. It's now or never. Now is the time. It's always been the time. But if you continue to use the same methods, how are you going to win? What is a damn protest going to do? Think about it. What did it do at the end of the day? What has it done? Nothing. But
Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis, but I wanted another one prior to that. Oh, Proverbs. Because there's another scripture telling you the same thing. The Most High always gives you fair warning, like, look, man, if you follow this path that I laid out already, you will have good success. That's what Joshua 1:8 talks about. And then he gives you another warning right here about your enemies. 26 and 25.
Hold it go. Proverbs 26 and verse 25. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart.
That's it. So if we don't take heed to that, we're going to keep falling for the same old garbage. They come out here, try to embrace you. They out here trying to, give you certain gifts, and even that. Let's get that right quick. Because there's another thing that, this is the oldest method that they use to calm us down. No matter what, we try to rebel, we try to go against them. The first thing they're going to do is this right here. Go ahead, 7 and 7.
Leviticus 7 and 7?
No, Ecclesiasticus. Yeah. Ecclesiasticus 7 and verse 7. It's not your Bible, huh?
Nope. All right, Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 7. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart.
Let's slow it down. Look, read that again.
Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad.
So if you know that you're in oppression, that there's oppressors, that the Most High has called them by name and called them your enemies, our enemies, of course, a wise individual is going to be upset at this situation. Also, mad is another definition for mad is crazy. So you might just lose it. You look at Israel out here just like not even knowing how to act, how to conduct themselves on a daily. So they take advantage of stuff like this. when you see a brother getting put to death on live television, and not just one brother, several brothers and sisters, you know, both in the brown and black community, what do you think the reaction is going to be? How do you think people are to react when they're fed up and not knowing that they might be the next victim to these, you know, enemies, to these devils? So of course an individual is going to act a certain way. Without understanding, you're going to act, the first thing you're going to do is try to seek revenge, right?
Man.
But as soon as they start seeing that, they do the latter part of the scripture. Go ahead.
And a gift destroyeth the heart.
A gift destroyed the heart. So that, you know, every election, our people fall for the same nonsense. Because it's funny that it's election time again. And no matter if it's Spanish, English, if it's the radio, or if it's television, no matter what's happening, right, you hear all these people encouraging the community, the black and brown community, to make sure that we go and vote, to make sure that we go and make our voice count. Has that ever worked? No. What do the scriptures say about voting? The scriptures tell you if it's not of your kind, if you don't fear the Most High, don't even bother with them.
That's in the law.
Exactly. That's in the law, and it states that directly, so we don't fall for this nonsense. But again, if we don't follow this law, a lot of people think that this is just religious, a religious book. A religious book in the sense of what Christianity has sold us, right? But it's beyond that. In this book, you have laws of ceremonial laws, you have civil laws that if we really studied them and followed them, we wouldn't be at the bottom. You have sacrificial, you have dietary laws, we wouldn't be as sick as we are. This COVID-19 issue wouldn't be that big in the brown and black community. Neither would be any other type of a sickness or plague. Because remember, that's another curse that was going to come upon our people for disobeying the Most High. And then you have, which one did I leave out?
We have cleanliness laws. That's not.
Nah, well, it's ceremonial. You have ceremonial, dietary, civil, moral, and sacrificial. I think I named them all. But either way, you look at the scriptures, in Joshua 1:8, it tells you, if we want success in our lives, then we got to really abide by these laws. If not, we're going to fall under the curse that we're going over right now, you know, bywords and so forth. But, yeah, go back now to Genesis 25. So we could kind of get some understanding of why Esau feels this way. Because sometimes a lot of people look at it like, man, I don't get it. What did anybody ever do to this man for him to act and treat us the way he treats us? We didn't do anything to him. He did it to himself. But go ahead and get 25 and 21.
Genesis 25 and 21.
This is the origin when this man came to be. Him and us, our forefather.
And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one shall be stronger than the other people.
The what?
And the one people shall be stronger than the other people.
Exactly. So you see that? The Most High had already laid it out. No matter what it is or what people think that, you know, Esau got done dirty by Jacob and his mom. No. The Most High, before they even came out of her womb, had already said, the one people shall be stronger than the other people. Pretty much, one's going to be superior to the other. We don't ever try to push all that. It just happens natural, right? But there's a book called the 13th Tribe. And in that book, at the beginning of the book, it talks about, I forgot the name, but the individual that made color an issue. They tried to set up, you know, white supremacy, which obviously was a heathen, you know. But right there, it shows you that we never had an issue with none of that. Neither did any other people. But the Most High had already laid it out right here. He says, the one people shall be stronger than the other people. And go ahead.
And the elder shall serve the younger.
Exactly. So we go down the way, you understand that Esau came out, you know. Actually, read it.
And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment. And they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them.
So right there is even showing you the power that Jacob had. It says the first came out red, right? His name was Esau. Jacob came out and held his heel. So showing you right there, when you read down the line, it's telling you, you know, the elder shall serve the younger. Esau knows this. And that's why Esau deals with us the way he deals with us. Because imagine all the stuff that they go and create to put us down, the Most High did it in the scriptures for them. Go to Isaiah 40 right quick. Isaiah 40 and verse 17, I believe is what I want.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 17. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity.
And vanity. So the Most High is showing you, other than Israel, his people, which you could read in Joel 2 and 27, every other nation is nothing to him. Every other nation is pretty much insignificant to the Most High. Man. People are going to be like, damn, y'all are doing the same thing that the white man does. You know, well, nah. It's not the same. It's not at all, because the Most High is telling us this. I didn't know this until I read it in the scriptures, you know. The way they made us feel for, you know, since I could remember, minorities, and the brother, you know, he could go in and some other terms. I'm going to bring out a couple of them. You know, you got drunks, drug addicts, wetbacks, ghetto, mujeriegos, which is pretty much, you know, a whoremonger, you know, a fornicator, which is kind of like the, one of the ways that, you know, people always want to identify the so-called Hispanic or Latino man, native to be exact, native indigenous man, as far as, you know, just sleeping around with different women and bearing babies all over the place. You got welferos, which is welfare recipients. You got deadbeats, you know, which goes both ways. Thugs, beaners. You got stuff that, you know, amongst ourselves we go into because we act like, you know, we better than the indigenous men. I mean by the so-called city-born people, indigenous, compared to the indigenous that's still in the pueblos and so forth, which you would know as a country. You got Chuntaro, Naco, Indian, the brother broke down savage, illegal, you know, porch monkey, 3/5 for my so-called black people. But then what did they refer? They consider the so-called natives, the Hispanic people, right? Animals. It's not even in the Constitution. So-called blacks is 3/5 of a man, and then the so-called indigenous are not even considered humans. So savage, illegal, porch monkeys, 3/5. Brother brought out cholo, coon, greaser, mestizo, mutt. You know, you have ornaleros. You know, you tend to think that so-called Latinos are only good, you know, for gardeners to, you know, conduct cheap labor and so forth. Right. Sambo, Uncle Tom, brother going into it as well. Hood rats, Mexiho, that's something that I guess is not our era, but, you know, Ratchet, Bad B, and the list goes on. I know you have a couple, so run through those right quick.
A couple minutes ago, he briefly touched upon in the book, the 13th Tribe, the Edomite, the heathen, who invented, you said colorism, pretty much racism based off of color. So that still affects us between Israel, between as so-called blacks, Chicanos, and Native Americans. We do that between each other, you know, on a daily basis, either on a I'm just joking with you level, or as on an honest distrust level between each other. Some of those terms be like between so-called black people, the light-skinned ones. Light skin in itself is a proverb and byword, but we call them yellow. I remember my cousin my family called him Yellow, and then his other brothers, you know, they're a little bit darker. But I mean, he came out, he was the one, and the whole family that came out light skinned, which just goes to show you more that Israel, you know, we didn't have like a stock color or a stock shade of brown rather that we came out with, you know, because it varies. And That's not to take away from Yahushua being, that dark-skinned olive man. That's from the tribe of Judah. That's who he is. That's his description. But Israel, like in general, as one of my Akim says, we come in all different shades of brown. But it's unfortunate now that because of that we ignorantly put divisions between ourselves as blacks, natives, and Chicanos. So here's another one, the Redskins. Now that's a confusing one, right? Or that's ironic. That's what so-called white people call Native Americans. They call them Redskins, but the Bible says y'all the real Redskins. So what was that? Projecting your insecurities on our people? I don't know, but I don't see what the Bible describes as a redskin, pale, no melanin, type person, like how they portrayed our people, so-called Native Americans, as redskins. And that bewilders me how they did that. Negro, from Spanish meaning black. That's what they would call Yahushai. That's what they would call a majority of the so-called southern kingdom of Israel, in Spanish. Negro, black. That's what they call us. But it's funny too, back in the 1700s, white people categorized Negro as a colorless term to include so-called blacks and Native Americans. So, man, it all gets, these proverbs and bywords, they come from something. It gets confusing. For some of my northern Israelite brothers that came from northern Mexico that may have moved up to the borderline, the invisible borderline of America, some of the lighter-skinned ones, brothers between Spanish-speaking people, they call them güeros. So that just means essentially, you're light-skinned. You're a light-skinned Native American due to a number of factors, conquest, bad marriage decisions, rape, fornication, all that. So we got Israelite brothers that are light skinned, but between the cliques that you might be called güero, is a Spanish term. Another one here, even between so-called black people, darky. I mean, white people for sure said that, but you might catch one of our own people, slipping and saying that, like, you darky. Not to be funny about that. African, that goes back to the scriptures dealing with the Hamitic nations, which were prophesied to be a dark-skinned nation as well, usually 10 times as more, generally darker than Israel. But, I mean, shoot, Yahushua hid out in Egypt to hide away from Herod so he can blend in. So, there's some truth proverb in that, but we use that as a negative term because, again, we're not African. They're a different separate nation from Israel. We're not Africans. And then probably one of the last ones I got here is Chino. And that typically deals with, from what I've heard hanging around in the past with some of my Latino 10 tribe homies, just deals with the way your eyes are shaped, and that it goes both rounds because I know that Asian people have been around in Mexico, immigrated over there, taking jobs really, and just some of our indigenous brothers, they got kind of not as slanted as Moab and Ammon, but they got kind of a little bit of those eyes too. So some of those words, Chino.
God, yeah. Check that other one out. Let me see, the one that says watermelon. Watermelon. Yeah, that one. Shoot. Read that right quick. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to announce the source?
Yeah, it's this is called Watermelon Nooses and Straight Razors. David Pilgrim is the author. Published, I believe, it's 2017.
Social scientists refer to words like nigger, kike, spick, and wetback as euphemisms. Such terms are the language of prejudice, verbal pictures of negative stereotypes. Howard J. Ehrlich, a sociologist, argued that euphemisms are of three types: disparaging nicknames like nigger, explicit group devaluations, for example, Jew him down, or niggering the land, and irrelevant ethnic names used as a mild disparagement. Example, Jewbird for cuckoos having prominent beaks, or Irish confetti for bricks thrown in a fight. Wow. Erdman Palmore, another sociologist, observed that the number of ethnophilisms used correlates positively with the amount of outgroup prejudice, and that ethnophilisms express and support negative stereotypes about the most visible racial and cultural differences. All racial and ethnic groups have been victimized by slurs, but no American group has suffered as many racial epithets as have black people. Tom, Sambo, Coon, Savage, Pickney, Mammy, Buck, Jigaboo, and the article cuts off from there. But
Con, and the list goes on. So just showing you, because when you go back and study this, it's crazy. This is all these terms were around ever since the 1800s. So imagine these terms have been used on our people probably before that, but it's documented that in the 1800s, this was a couple of these terms, like wetback, spick, and so forth, were the ones that were being used heavily on Israel, and how the latter part of this paragraph, there's a little article talks about, it says all racial and ethnic groups have been victimized, but not as much as the so-called blacks. And I will say yay to that to an extent, but at the same time, the way the media plays it, it's always focusing on one particular, I would call it the Southern Kingdom, instead of really putting it all out there as far as, a balance. Because when you really look at it, it might not happen. It happens out here. But even going back to, you got to understand, Mexico. Mexico is not owned by the native Mexica people or Aztec or Mayan people or any native tribe, because there's so many tribes. Even in Mexico City, when you look at it, I was looking at a documentary this week that a lot of people talk about the immigration, the migration that has happened from Mexico to the U.S., right, to the United States. But nobody talks about the indigenous people that have migrated to certain cities like Mexico City out of their, little villages and so forth. But I'm bringing this up because in Mexico, you have social classes like anywhere else. In Central America, you have the same thing. Caribbean, South America. And the discrimination happens no matter where you go, where you live at. It's always going to happen upon the people of the Most High, upon Israel. We were in Peru back in a couple of years ago, and it's the same thing. You still got the darker indigenous people picking cotton in the fields. It's called Carmel in South America and Peru. You got your city folks are mainly like, all the European descent, Spaniards and Edomites and so forth. You also have other, cultures in there. You go to the Caribbean, the same thing. You look at Jamaica. Jamaica has the Jamaican brothers, which, Israelites, the natives, and you also have a lot of Elamites that came and migrated into that section, the section of the world, right? So you have a lot of stuff, but one thing we always got to recall is Second Chronicles 9:1 talks about, that you're identified by the seed which is carried by your father, obviously, the male. So whatever your father is, that's what you are, right? So, and then that ties also as well with Romans 8:16, talking about the Spirit. The Spirit beareth witness on who is a son of the Most High. You have that?
It's not Second Chronicles 9.
First Chronicles 9:2, 9:1. I'm pretty sure it's
I
Second
usually
Chronicles.
go to Numbers.
But we don't need to go there. But the scripture
Alright.
talks, and also like he said in Numbers, it talks about we are what our father is. The seed is carried by the male.
Right.
So no matter, what male goes into what female, that kid that comes out of that relationship is going to be whatever that father is. So even with that, like the brother was bringing out Chino and stuff like that, you go to South America, you got a lot of Moabites that moved in, even in Mexico, so it kind of becomes complicated to identify who Israel is. But as you see the social injustices and all the stuff that, for example, the blacks out here with what was it, Tuskegee? Tuskegee experiment, the syphilis, the same thing happened to our indigenous people out in Guatemala. The same things like the massacre out here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A similar situation happened out there in El Salvador. What was it called? It's in 1932. And the list goes on, though. No matter where you go, the same curses that Deuteronomy 28 talks about has occurred to our people, no matter if they're in the Western Hemisphere or, you know, in Europe, Africa, and so forth, Asia. Because remember, the Most High said one of the curses was gonna be that we were gonna be scattered through the four corners of the earth. He says, amongst all the nations, you will be a byword, a proverb, and also what, an astonishment, right? But let's check out a couple of these videos. Yeah, you finished with that. Just check out, you know, if you go to the PowerPoint again, check this out, stuff that you guys are familiar with.
Hey folks, I'm Joe Biden. I'd like to ask you to join my campaign. As I've said time and again, we're in a battle for the soul of this nation. And that means not only defeating Donald Trump, but also taking...
Okay, the comments from the president are just the latest in a long list of racially incendiary remarks from Donald Trump. Here are just a few of his insensitive comments, many coming after he started his campaign for the nation's highest office. Back when he announced his candidacy, the day he announced his candidacy in 2015, he made inflammatory remarks about Mexico.
Give us a minute right quick. So, you know what? Pretty sure you guys are aware already of what, you know. That's why I say I kind of respect this man, though. Because off the top, he says it, he means it, and he don't hold back. Which a lot of heathens, after he came into power, have pretty much done the same thing. I know our people get upset at that, but at least you will recognize, you know, and understand that that is the spirit that they have. As we go, you know, wait for the video right quick, going back to Deuteronomy. Genesis 25 and 21. Let's continue on and understand how Esau felt in regards to Israel. So let me get, I think I want Genesis. When he died.
Yeah, when Isaac died. That was,
Jacob. Yeah, Isaac passed.
It's in, I believe, 27.
And 31 or 41. It should be
41,
right there.
yeah.
Genesis 27 and 41. Just so we could really understand why it is that Esau feels the way he feels, right? Because after, you know, we left off with Jacob grabbing his heel, then you see the story, it unfolds, which we could hold that and go to Romans right quick. Because a lot of people have issues with this. Talk about, you know, Jacob and his mom did Esau dirty, but look at what it says right here in Romans. 9 and go down a little bit, like
12?
Yeah, right there. Let me see right quick. Romans 9, 11.
Romans 9 and 11. For the children, being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth.
Go ahead.
It was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger.
That's it. And then continue that. Continue with 13.
As it was written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated.
So you know Esau knows that. Esau knows that, and that's the reason why he treats us the way that he treats us. Because now we go back and get Genesis 27 and 41. Look at what it says right here in regards to this devil.
And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him.
He originally gave that up himself. And the scriptures tell you that regardless, that was the will of the Most High. That was his purpose, is what we just read in Romans 9, 11 down to 13. So it says, and Esau hated Jacob because of his blessing wherewith his father blessed him. Go ahead.
And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob.
Exactly. So let's go to Ezekiel 35. 35 and 5. And this is, again, just how you are able to identify Israel, you're able to identify this devil, no matter where in the world you are at. Ezekiel 35:5. Get that?
Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred.
what?
A perpetual hatred.
Perpetual. What does that mean?
Constant.
Right?
Eternal.
Forever. Go ahead.
A perpetual hatred, and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord God, I will prepare thee unto blood.
Exactly. The part I wanted out of that was, that perpetual hate that he has had for our people. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint. Little disclaimer for Esau and his damn laws. All right, so a couple of the vids we're going to look at right quick. You guys remember this devil, right? And what he said?
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
All right, and of course, he was talking about Haiti. According to the New York Times, he complained that the 15,000 Haitian immigrants who received visas in 2017 all have AIDS. In that very same meeting, the Times reports, he said that once the 40,000 Nigerian immigrants given visas arrived in the U.S., they would never go back to their huts. The White House denies this report. During the presidential election, Donald Trump referred to a Gold Star mother saying, look at his wife. She was standing there, just standing there. She had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say, implying that she was being silenced because of the family's Muslim faith. Candidate Trump also went after a U.S. district judge who presided over fraud allegations against Trump University, citing the judge's Mexican heritage.
We're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is he is giving us very unfair rulings.
All right, at a White House ceremony very recently honoring...
Remember he said they are his whole countries. Think about that. And the crazy part about it is that when you really study why these countries are so-called third world countries, is because of America. It's the reason is because America made it like that. They have created so many wars between the people in these countries, taking the resources and now have them in that impoverished condition and claim, like you see the devil right here, as if they were, a superior people.
Navajo code talkers. The president used a nickname for Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Elizabeth Warren that many people may have found offensive.
A representative in Congress.
If she could help him set up a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus.
Are you going to include the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional
Well, I
Hispanic
would.
Caucus?
I tell you what, do you want to
as well
set
as
up the
on
meeting?
civic
Do you want to set up the meeting?
No.
Are they friends of yours?
I'm just a reporter.
No, set up the meeting.
I know some.
And during a presidential debate, he generalized the lives of minority communities.
African Americans, Hispanics are living in hell because it's so dangerous. You walk down the street, you get shot.
So when you look at that, right, going back to the scripture that we are covering this evening, right, no matter who talks about us, it's always going to be in this type of form, right? Either a byword, this more like a proverb, right? Some of the proverbs are what, like, last hire, first one fired, always late. Like you're gonna see in some of these videos, it goes and talks about even the cartoons, how they depicted our people back in the day. But before we go there, get this one as well. This devil female.
The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation, created by cable.
The fourth challenge is to take back our streets from crime,
this, right?
gangs, and drugs. And we have actually been making progress on this count as a nation because of what local law enforcement
There's
officials
the
are doing,
president
because of
everybody
what
loved.
citizens and neighborhood patrols are doing. We're making some progress. Much of it is related to the initiative called community policing, because we have finally gotten more police officers on the street. That was one of the goals that the president had when he pushed the crime bill that was passed in 1994. He promised 100,000 police. We're moving in that direction, but we can see it already makes a difference. Because if we have more police interacting with people, having them on the streets, we can prevent crimes. We can prevent petty crimes from turning into something worse. But we also have to have an organized effort against gangs, just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the president has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
So I wonder who that is. Let's check it out. And when she was asked the question recently,
In
look at this
1996,
nonsense.
you used the term super predators to describe some young kids. Some feel like it was racial code. Was it? And were you wrong to use that term?
Well, I was speaking about drug cartels and criminal activity that was very concerning to folks across the country. I think it was a poor choice of words. I never used it before. I haven't used it since. I would not use it again. Because my whole life, to go back to what I was saying to Mr. McGee, is, you know, really, ever since I went to work for the Children's Defense Fund, is to try to figure out ways to even the odds for people that are left out and left behind. And I know very well that we have too many kids in our country right now who are living in poverty, who are going to schools like the ones in Detroit that have mold and rodents in them. I saw that in South Carolina. It's unfortunately across America. So what we've got to do is provide more opportunities earlier in the lives.
You hear the
of
garbage,
each
right?
child.
She never answered the question. Just how they always do when they are, you know, put on the spot. They don't answer what was being asked. They go into this whole big circle of saying nothing, just like Trump and everybody else, every other politician. But check out what Micah says right here, Micah 2 and verse 1. This is talking about these devils right here that we see every year running for for presidency and so forth, for all these political seats. Go ahead.
Micah 2 and 1. Woe unto them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in their power of their hand.
Why is it in the power of their hand? Let's get Job right quick, Job 9 and 24. Remember, Israel, at the end, no matter how frustrated you might be, how upset, you know, and how messed up the conditions we living in get, we got to recall always that it's our fault. It's because of our decisions and our disobedience that we ended up in this condition. Go ahead and read that.
Job 9 and 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and he covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?
Exactly. So the Most High is telling you right here. There's a scripture in the Apocrypha too that talks about the world and the power was transferred to these nobodies right here, which we read in Isaiah 40 and 17 a little while ago. Yeah. And that's the exact reason why Esau is so upset. Because remember, once this is over, once Israel wakes up, then guess what? His kingdom is done. Second Esdras 6 talks about it. I'll read it briefly. It says, Second Esdras 6 and verse 7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. That's what Esau's afraid of. And that's why that perpetual hate is always going to remain until Yahushua comes back and destroys them. Until, you know, the remnant of them that actually bow down, serve their time, and get put to death eventually. Mosai said, look, Esau is going to be done with. Obadiah tells you about that. And right here is telling you, remember when Jacob took a hold of Esau's heel, is because Jacob is going to be the end, pretty much. Jacob is what follows, the beginning of the good times, to put it that way. It says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, that eternal kingdom in which Yahushua is going to reign. But we're going to go back and scope out a couple more of these clips But go back to Micah right quick and read Micah 2:2. Because this is the story of Esau, and it's always been, but now all of a sudden they act like they, they didn't come in. Trump is right here calling everybody a criminal, talking about people having AIDS and so forth, when all these devils have done for centuries is create these issues, set up borders, steal lands, right? Covet. Let the scripture talk.
Micah 2:2. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage.
That's cold right there. Again, and our heritage. We don't recognize, we don't understand who we are. Before we continue also, let me get Psalms 83. Psalms 83, and just get to the point, I think it's 6.
Got you.
Psalms 83, and read verse, actually start at 3. Start at 2. We could really emphasize that we have enemies. The Most High has enemies. Israel, his nation, has enemies. Go ahead.
Psalms 83:2. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones.
For what? Go ahead.
They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.
Exactly. So the name of Israel may be no longer in remembrance. Check this out. Let me see. Go to the PowerPoint out. Are you able to read this out?
From up there, yeah, I can read that from up there. Oh, not no more.
Slock, yeah. All right.
That hurts too.
Go ahead and read that.
In a December 1988 news conference at Chicago's Hyatt Regency, O'Hare Hotel, where leaders of 75 black groups met to discuss national.
So like you can read it probably better right there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Discuss a new national black agenda. Jesse Jackson announced that members of their race preferred to be called African American. The campaign he then led to replace the term black met immediate success among African American opinion makers and more gradual acceptance in the national press. Jackson's cultural offensive proposed an ethnic reference for a racial one, aiming thereby to help create as much as express a sense of ethnic identity among black Americans.
Imagine that. Let's go back to Jeremiah 17, how we read it earlier, right? So basically it went from, it says, from Negro to black to African American, the power of names and naming. So you see Jesse Jackson, 1988, that's when the term African American was introduced. Instead of using, black, and then black, if you read at the bottom, it was in the 60s that it was introduced instead of being considered Negro. The black term came along, and then in the 80s, or almost the 90s, the African American term came along. But it's funny that it says, it says every ethnic group in this country has a reference to some land base, some historical cultural base. African Americans have hit the level of cultural maturity. Think about that. They are Armenian Americans, they're Jewish Americans, and Arab Americans, Italian Americans, and so forth, right? And with a degree of accepted and reasonable pride, they connect their heritage to their mother country and their Slovakia, and where they are now. So African American. Is that really our heritage, though?
It is not.
It is not. And that's what the Most High said again. We're going to read it again, revisit it, like I said earlier, Jeremiah 17 and verse 4. Go ahead.
Clever, but no, yeah. And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever.
Exactly. So imagine that's the reason why they try to introduce this, or that's supposedly, Jesse Jackson's idea of why, we came with this terminology, African American. But you see, at the bottom it says, so we could have a sense of culture and the land that we belong to. But let me get Galatians 4:26. So Jeremiah already told us, Psalms told us that their whole point was to erase the understanding of Israel, us being a nation, and then being in the condition that we're in now, in a lack of knowledge and lack of culture, not understanding our heritage, not even knowing, discontinuing fully from our heritage, which is what Psalms 83 said, that was their ultimate goal. But look at the landmass that we're supposed to be claiming according to Galatians. What is it?
Galatians 4:26 says, but Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all.
Exactly. And, we could argue that back and forth. I mean, yeah, Jerusalem is some of Israel is within the African continent. But overall, remember, we are not Africans. The scriptures say we are Hebrew Israelites according to our forefathers, according to scriptures. But let's go back to the PowerPoint. Let me get Salakia. Remember all the terms that they use since the 1800s to describe our people. If you're not aware, this is the Jim Crow era, and these are the cartoons that, were playing even into the 80s.
Wow. Fight. Take that. You take that. I'll bust your head. Lazy town. 1 hour stop for lunch. Take that. You take that.
Listen, Mammy, that ain't no way to wash clothes. What you all need is rubber.
What do you all mean, really?
I'll show you what I mean. In Harlem, there's a little place where everyone goes to see the way a washerwoman washes her clothes. If you like boogie woogie rhythm, she's got a beat. Let the boogie woogie washerwoman give you a treat. On every afternoon at when the sessions begin, and all the boys from all the bands come down and sit in. They sit around and knock each other out when they play, while the boogie woogie washerwoman washes all day. Rub me up, dub. That's just the way she rubs. Rub me up, dub. That's just the way she scrubs. Rub me up, dub. She wears out all her tubs. She rubs and rubs her knuckles right on down to the nubs. Rub me up, dub. That's how she kicks it off. Rub me up, dub. She keeps it nice and soft. Rub me up, dub. Till someone hollers off. Rub me, mama, with the boogie.
And you could check the rest of this and, you know, the whole Jim Crow era and the Jim Crow laws, which pretty much put our people, you know, Israel couldn't be in the same places, couldn't eat in the same places as the so-called white man, Esau. And but the funny thing is how the brother read earlier out of this little article right here. Read that again from the second
Right.
sentence.
The coon was sometimes presented as oversexed, with a powerful, imposing physique, a wily intelligence, and unbridled sense of courage. The root of today's black criminal stereotype can be traced to the coon.
So we see that in this picture, right, in this cartoon. Also, as lazy, right? The features always got to be exaggerated. You look at all that stuff, and you look into the Jim Crow era and even the products that America used to sell back in the day. You know, all throughout the products, all throughout, you know, you know, from hairdress to, you know, food supplies. It's crazy how they would just, you know, put our people on blast and clown, you know, Israel. You also, I don't know if you're familiar, I'm not gonna have enough time to go into it, but you could look up the history of the Bronx Zoo. It was a human zoo. You had an individual, not sure if he's Israel. He was from, you know, from Africa or whatnot. Most likely he might have been Israel. I can't confirm that, but his name was Oda Banga. You know, they had him caged up at the Bronx Zoo with monkeys, with a monkey, and the brother ended up killing himself. He killed himself because Edomites will come in and taunt him, clown him, and even chase him and poke him with you know, like poke his ribs and stuff like that, mess with him, you know, like put hands on him or whatever. And imagine being in a cage with an animal in a zoo, and you're displayed as as such.
Less than human.
That's going back to, you look into Darwin as well. Darwin, that devil, you know,
Right.
he brought out that pretty much scientifically that the white race was superior and every other race was pretty much worthless. It was, and you know, that's when you start seeing population control. Population control starts coming up and you know, hitting the so-called blacks and so-called Latino, native, indigenous people heavy until this day, because of the fact that, you know, they were using this scientific idea that non-Nordic people in the U.S. were pretty much non-European people were insignificant,
Right.
worthless, and pointless. You know, it was pointless having these people around.
Inferior, devolved.
Inferior, all that, right? Savages, Indians, you know, good for nothings, porch monkeys and so forth. All that stuff has been pushed ever since, you know, even before we arrived in this country. But go look into the Bronx Zoo, and you know, even what was that sister's name? They put her up in a museum as well.
I don't know about his sister, but there was another Jake Native American named Ishi. They pretty much had him living in a museum-like type of state of living because he was the last of his tribe, so he kind of went.
If you look at Oda Banga, you're gonna find, like the brother said, because you know, they had the buffalo, and their idea was to put the indigenous people as well in the cages so they could display, you know, the buffalo, the Indians, the Native Americans, the black brother, and so forth with the monkeys, because they were saying that the white race is the superior race, and that every other race, they use even the negritos from the Philippines, they put them in the zoo to show the evolution of men from monkey to the Caucasian individual. Which the funny thing about it is when you look in the scriptures, the cave dwellers were Esau, have always been Edomites, you know? But it's funny how they try to flip the history, but it's not ever going to work. I mean, it has worked to an extent, because guess what? Our people nowadays, with just that term minority, we feel like we're inferior to them. You know, you talk to certain people, they look at, you know, that's why they brought that white image, to think that Christ and God were, you know, red or Caucasian, white, whatever you want to call it. You know, all of the stuff that they've been pushing has been to, you know, bring our people to feel inferior. So what else? Yeah, Francis Galto, The Descent of a Man. He got is a book also. What was the name of the book? I don't think I took it down, but basically there's a book that around the Darwin, you know, around when Darwin was alive and so forth, they put together basically breaking down that the white man was coming to an end, and that's why they started heavily pushing, you know, the annihilation of other races, primarily, you know, natives and blacks.
Survival of the fittest, social.
Yeah, that.
That's
Tell them.
It's called Darwin, in his social Darwinism, he called it survival of the fittest. So
natural selection as well.
Yeah, natural selection. Mm-hmm. Another one, I mean, not necessarily Charles Darwin, but that they push as far as Edomite white supremacy is the Hamitic hypothesis, being that white people were the original, or white people were the original African civilizations, like of Egypt, and pretty much all the high culture good ones, the ones that had, you know, the fancy buildings and housing. So we're going to say Egypt for right now. They pretty much have twisted that lie and say, oh, white people, we came from those Africans and everything, and then just somehow down the line, you know, they got light skin and even better than where they're at, you know, today. That's one of the other lies they push, you know.
Yeah, the name of the title of the book was, I believe, is The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. So Esau's always been shook about, you know, being pretty much how you see right now, the rate of reproduction in the white community or the white, you know, society has fallen to an extreme amount, which basically leads, that's the reason why they go and have interracial marriages, because they know by themselves the Most High is already annihilating them. You know, the genocide that they try to pull on the whole world, primarily on Israel, is backfiring on them, and the Most High is, you know, allowing them to understand, like, look, in a minute you're not going to be able to reproduce. That's why they go ahead and use every other people to try to continue, you know, their lineage. That's the same thing that they done from the jump, trying to, you know, go into every race, raping every female available to be able to continue their devilish lineage. We're going to finish it off with this last clip right here. Go back to the PowerPoint out. And this is also in regards to, you know, the Jim Crow era. I had a lot of videos talking and showing you, you know, racial incidents between whites and blacks and whites and Hispanics. But I mean, if you Israel, you pretty much have lived through several of these. But get the PowerPoint again out.
As African Americans fought for civil rights throughout the 20th century, Hispanic Americans were engaged in a parallel struggle, even if it wasn't in the national headlines. Despite the fact that its first non-native residents spoke Spanish, Texas's story for many years had been told from a primarily Anglo point of view, which often cast the Tejano as an outsider. As a result, Tejano citizens in the early 20th century met prejudice in many aspects of their lives. Anti-Mexican hatred sometimes led to violence, beatings and lynchings, as well as more commonplace discrimination in the workplace and community. Up until the 60s, it was not unusual to find a sign on stores or restaurants that read, "No dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans." Tejanos were subject to the same Jim Crow laws and city ordinances used to restrict African Americans, disenfranchising Tejanos, segregating them, and depriving them of opportunity. In the 1920s, Tejanos reacted by forming organizations.
You know what? There's one more I want to show before I close up. Let's see. I guess that'll be it. But you guys can look up on your own time the gasoline baths in the border. These are things that, you know, before the borders were set up and the border patrol was set up, so-called Mexicans were allowed to come up and cross the border, but they would have to get they would go in these baths and they would bathe them in gasoline and all these other chemicals, supposedly because they were, you know, full of lice and so forth, unclean or whatnot. But the funny thing is that the only border that would conduct these type of, you know, what do you call it, procedures would only be the Mexican, the south border. Because, you know, you had Asians coming in through San Francisco and so forth. You had other people coming through New York and the East Coast. But the only people that would face these things was the southern border, which, you know, was connected with Mexico, which, you know, is crazy. And you look into it, there was a sister, I forgot her name, but pretty much she fought for the, she rebelled against those baths. And, you know, a little war or a little, I guess, what do you call it, a protest happened. And she was able to get away from that particular incident, but also got, you know, beat and so forth, arrested. They were looking at her like if she was kind of, what was the sister's name in the back of the bus?
Oh, Rosa.
Rosa Parks. But the way the Jake describes it is like the difference with Rosa Parks is that it actually led to a change. This sister, and Salaki, because I forgot her name, you know, she got beat and everything, but it didn't continue to do anything for the people. It was pretty much, you know, it quieted down after that particular incident. But as you've seen right now, the Jim Crow laws and so forth, it also affected the indigenous people. As you know, you could see in the signs, it was always no dogs, no Negroes, no blacks or no Mexicans, no Indians and so forth. But let's finish off with Deuteronomy 7 and 6, so we could recall that we are not all these terms that we went over this evening, but we are what the Most High calls us in this particular precept right here. Go ahead.
Deuteronomy 7 and 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. Mm-hmm. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
You see that? The Most High has told us, you are the superior race. You are the opposite of what these devils have always tried to paint you as being, right? Inferior minorities, good for nothing, lazy, welfare recipients and so forth, right? Drug addicts, what does Jake say? Rapists. All of that is not what we are. All of that is what we allow to be if we don't come, you know, if we don't come to the understanding of what the scriptures are telling us. Most High just said, look, you are a special people, a people above all the other people in the face of this world, right? Of this earth. Let me finish off, actually, Joel 2 and 27. That scripture is heavy right there. Joel 2 and 27. The Most High really calls it out right here. He says exactly who we are and what he is unto us.
The book of Joel 2 and verse 27. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed.
Exactly. So remember that, Israel. We're not to be ashamed. We got to wake up, come back to our heritage, fully understand these laws so we could flip the script on these devils. And, you know, gather that 1/3 so we could be able to get up out of this hellhole, because that's all this is. This is a testing ground. And until we get it right, you know, we're going to continue to live these curses. So with that, we say shalom until the next time.
One word of advice, too? And just one word of advice with the media, which was brought out a couple times. Don't just play into the black-white, you know, polarity media. It's all Israel, which is why we say blacks, Latinos, Native Americans. The media frame, they don't want you outside of the box. They wanted to keep you in the black-white frame media. But as we brought out with a lot of evidence, do your research.
Khan. Good night, Yasserallah.
Good night.